If you watch any big movie trailer released in the last 150 years, as long as it's not a romantic comedy, you can almost guarantee at some point the trailer devolves into a cacophony of motion, noise, explosions, and fights. Action inherently tells a story. It's confusing, scary, visceral. Something is happening. It demands your attention to find out what's going on and why. These trailers continue to get made because they work. If even one of these quick visuals catches your eye, if one of those 6 frames of a lightsaber with a crossguard made of more lightsaber really catch your fancy, that, my friends, is a ticket sale. Hello, Pirate Bay. 2 tickets to Star Wars 7 for, please. But when you sit down and watch the film for real, what makes an action scene good? I've watched at least 10 films in me time, and I think I've isolated what makes a good action film down to 2 specific points. In my experience, good action scenes communicate the action well. In other words, the physical space of the scene and what's happening in it, but also advance the story by developing the theme or providing characterization. Let's start by looking at a film you've never heard of that does neither. Death Wish 3 is a film about a man who protects the downtrodden by shooting a lot of bad people. The action itself has a degree of viscera to it, blood, explosions, and so on, but it doesn't get across any particular ideas. It's a man shooting people with his gun, and you know they deserve it because they dress evil and cackle, and they re-shooting at the good guy. The violence is huge. Kersey kills over 70 people on screen in this film, and he does it with an array of massive weapons. In a good film, action is the result of story, and you re-engaged in the action because you care about the characters. Bad films have bad stories, or no stories at all, and uninteresting characters, and try to regain your attention with the action. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but when a film has to pull out an actual machine gun and a missile launcher to keep your attention, that's an admission the film doesn't have any other way of doing it. Numerous scenes are dedicated to telling you how cool the guns are just to make sure you know. Oh, a 44 Magnum is a pistol cartridge, and a 475 Wildly Magnum is a shorter version of the African big game cartridge. Oh, is this not big enough for you? How about this machine gun? Here, look at it. Just look at it for a while. No, really, there's literally a scene where a guy shows you the machine gun he has, and then they put it back. Normally, you'd be getting invested in the characters and story, but instead the film has to stop and go, no, keep watching. The action's coming, and it's gonna be big, we promise. And then you actually get to the action, and, well, it's just the most uninterestingly shot action you can get. Shot of Paul shooting his gun. Shot of bad guys falling down. Rinse. Repeat. Dry your hands with the towel dispenser. Oh, it's out. I'm gonna have to go into the stall and tear off a bunch of toilet paper. There's one really good piece of action in the film, and it's here. For 12 frames, this guy really knows how dead he is. So not only does it not advance the story, but the action is uninteresting, too, which is the cardinal sin of a crappy budget action film. But which is a unit, a cardinal nonsense sin, a crappy budget answer to this while these we have reviewed with There's times when Death Wish Man talks to people, eats with them, and has a nice date with a lady half his age, and we learn a little more about him and the people he's trying to protect. But a good film would fuse action and characterization. You'd learn about Death Wish Man while he was death wishing instead of having to stop everything and go have dinner with the nice people downstairs. Death Wish 3 doesn't tick either of these boxes, but who cares about Death Wish 3? Instead, let's look at The Avengers, one of the highest grossing films of all time. Look at Pivas Civil Theo Avengers has some of the worst action scenes I've seen in me entire life. This is me favorite scene to deconstruct. It feels off, jarring somehow, doesn't it? Well, here's why. Obviously, their heads are nowhere near each other, so they cut to this other angle for the headbutt, since you can't see how far apart their heads are from here, but because they've just cut from this angle, it's really obvious to the viewer that she hasn't actually hit him because we know how far apart they are. It automatically reads as fake, but then before it cuts back to the previous angle, this henchman walks right in front of the frame, so when they cut back to this angle, it's super jarring. In these two shots, Black Widow flippy-doos off I'll go to crush this guy before he can go for his gun, which he presumably dropped. I say presumably because whoever shot this scene never shows if he has a gun or if he dropped it or where it went. He's clearly reaching for something. They seemingly accidentally obscured what he's reaching for and forgot to get a pickup shot or put it in the edit, but since I am such a nice guy, I decided to help out. Here's a shot of a hand reaching for a gun that was dropped, and here's a shot of Scarlett Johansson reacting to that. Feel free to edit this into the director's cut of the film, Joss, unless you're too busy smoking weedin'. Oh, cut this part out. In other words, the scene fails to communicate what's happening in it. The editing and cinematography are ridiculously jarring. Why is this shot sideways? Why is it back to normal? What? It's sideways again. Please help me. Avengers is hurting me brain. Mistakes like this are all over the series. It would be too easy to blame Joss Whedon or Jimmy Husitz or whoever directed the nightmare that is the Hulk reboot. Heck, the cinematographer for this scene, the worst scene in film history, let me remind you, is Seamus McGarvey, who also did the 2014 Godzilla film, aka The the best-looking thing ever made before Fury Road came out. So the guy's not an idiot. The sheer consistency of these mistakes leads me to believe that the deeper problem is with a large company trying to put out a huge, cohesive, expanded universe comprising over a dozen movies and counting. Inevitably, the production is either rushed or reined in by the corporate types trying to keep the whole thing together and on track for 2018 when Phase 7 billion starts. Stoke for Avengers. I hear Marvel got really hands-on this time. They really pinned in Joss Whedon creatively, so how could that go wrong? Ironically, this was the problem with Death Wish 3 as well. The film was produced by the Cannon Group, famous for rushing all aspects of production and being run by two of the most cinema-illiterate people of all time. So what kind of stories can a director unhemmed by the need to fit agent pre-existing production pipeline do? Here's the part where I talk specifically about Quentin Tarantino for far too long, sorry. But that's because Tarantino is really good at telling a story using action. I mean, look at this famous shot where you don't even see what's happening. The camera slides away, screams music, and eventually Mr. Blonde enters the frame carrying a fake plastic human ear. He hasn't just put this guy through something awful. He's put you through it too by making you imagine it happening instead of simply showing it to you. This makes the audience reflexively hate Mr. Blonde. It makes you wish that someone could save the cop. And the fact that now you care and now you reinvested, that's one of my favorite things that can happen in cinema. Don't. This is made surprising because the camera work does everything it can to avoid reminding you that Mr. Orange is in the room with them. Even when it pans away, Mr. Orange would be lying on the ground right down there, but they angle it just right so you don't see him. You forget he's there. This makes the reemergence of Mr. Orange into the scene surprising and engaging, and it does it by mostly not showing you anything. Reservoir Dogs certainly leaves room for improvement in the visual storytelling department. Take this scene again from his first film, and much less iconic for a good reason. How does he get across how destructive and surprising a guy shooting a gun 700 times in public would look? Well, there's a couple of screams dubbed in post and we get a shot of a cop getting hurt. We don't really learn much about Mr. Pink in this scene except that he has a magic gun with infinite ammo and is a really bad shot. Pink actually took part in the final shootout at the end, but his bullets missed everyone. In Django Unchained, another Tarantino character kills another lawman. What has Tarantino learned after 20 years of pointing cameras at guns? Dentist Waltz is about to shoot the sheriff with a Derringer. A Derringer is a tiny gun. They look really silly. They read derisively known as purse guns. It can still kill you, but it looks really silly if you execute it poorly. How do you make shooting someone out of nowhere with a tiny toy-like gun dramatic and big? You see that. It's a tiny gun, but he pulls in until the thing dominates the frame. It doesn't look so tiny anymore, does it? This simple reframing technique makes all the difference on an audience. Here, a scene from Dusk Till Dawn 3 in which a character pulls the same gun out of nowhere. Kill her. It's a less surprising way of doing it, isn't it? Which is weird because this movie knows how to make a gun look threatening. I'm not gonna steal it or nothing. I just want them to see it up close. Is this close enough? Whoosh. But back to Cutie Patootie. This shot continues to show how surprising this all is by having a bunch of people react to it in the frame. But more importantly, we get Stoltz's reaction. He's just like, whatever, this is my day job. His lack of reaction is a reaction. Stoltz takes his time with it. He's clinical, like some kind of former medical professional. In the space of less than a minute, we see two shots from the same gun and how everyone in the scene feels about those shots, and we learn a lot about one of our main characters. He's talked about too much already, but I still think that modern Hollywood could stand to learn a lot from the way this guy makes films. It's a standard now on most movies to, at the very least, have two cameras. Okay, you have your main shot, and then there's this other camera, and then you resticking it somewhere. You know, it sits a sloppy angle, but it's just there to give you a little bit more footage in the editing room, and so you can just kind of get through your day a little bit easier. I don't want that. I have one camera on the set, and the only shot we reshooting is the shotting and framing. I frame the shot, and Bob Richardson lights the shot for that frame, and that's it. And I don't want sloppy ass crap, all right, in there that I can just cut to. Quentin Tarantino has a few weird specific obsessions, like only using on camera, shooting on film instead of digital, even in the modern day, and feet. But these obsessions seem to protect him from the garbage of the modern Hollywood production pipeline. But you don't have to look to Tarantino for good examples of films that use good action to tell a great story. Just get across what's happening well, and make sure it's happening for a reason to characters you've made the audience care about. Charles Alien takes its time getting to know the crew of the Nostromo before it sends them into alien murder town, and it keeps the silly rubber monster suit scary by being careful with how they show it and when, and using only brief bursts of violence. Wake up, Dallas. But enough about not showing action. What happens when you want to show people what's happening? Terminator and Terminator 2 both use action flawlessly, but of course they would. Everyone knows Terminator 1 is the best film ever made, but this chase sequence in Terminator 2 is especially good because the shots contrast the size of the vehicles involved, reflecting how the Minus 1000 is a far more advanced machine than the Minus 800. Robert Patrick is a fantastic actor, but he's not exactly a muscle man. Making him seem threatening to Arnold requires visual compositions like this one to show what's going on under the surface. The slippy, shiny, surface. This scene used to look good, but it kinda doesn't anymore. I'll explain why in a future video. The Avengers movies have comedic writing in them, but there's rarely comedy in their actual action scenes. It goes missing somewhere. I think lots of directors don't even know you can do comedy with visuals. You can make a scene funny just by how you choreograph movement. By fun In Fargo, by framing the corpse out, the Coen brothers create a fantastic shot of a bleeding Steve Buscemi angrily kicking at nothing, summing up just how much the character's kidnapping scheme has gone off the rails in a single image. The one thing the Coens can definitely teach is that if you hold with something long enough, it becomes funny. Take this scene, where the action is just a man having a temper tantrum. Kill it. A worse filmmaker would cut from here to the next scene, but instead they are willing to hold on it, and they stay there long enough that he realizes how silly he looks and goes back to scraping his car. Or this scene, where they hold long enough on Buscemi's tissue-covered face as he stares at the money that it becomes inherently funny watching him take himself seriously. Jesus Christ. Or this scene in Miller's Crossing, which stretches this principle past its breaking point and pushes it into becoming one of the best scenes in film history. No matter what level of violence you're going for, it's always possible to get a laugh out of it if you do it right. I'm a slave, plain sane babe. So there are a lot of good ways you can use the simple act of a person hurting another person to get something across. Just think about how to show what's happening. Maybe don't to show any of it. Maybe show too much. You don't need any gun props either. You just need to know what feelings and ideas you want to communicate with the scene and execute it in a way that brings these things to the foreground. You can say a lot by showing very little violence. Sometimes you don't even need squibs or blood or gore to imply a character has been killed. Sometimes you just need to, budda, cookin', a nutty budda, Dinah, sister hiding out on brunch. Baby, thank you all very much for watching. I'd like to say a special thanks to Niels Abildgaard, Peter Brodson, Renslayer, Rikami, Samuel Scartherax, Lord of the Roaches, Scott Jerton, Sean Higgins, Edwazelo, Two Armed Blues and Red Drapes, and Axel Blaze. Wait a second. Why is... Why is Axel Blaze at the bottom of the list? I try to alphabetize the list, and for some reason Axel Blaze's name is at the bottom. That doesn't make any wax. Axel Blaze, if you really watching this, and I know you are because you were giving me money to make these for some reason. About 5 years ago, you had an avatar on the Something Awful forums that was, oh, from Adventure Time, and that avatar sold me on watching the show. And I really, really liked it, and it caused me to make radically different life decisions, and I might not be making these videos if it weren't for the choices that really well, for you, Leo, Leo, whether you wave, Leo, 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 whether you Leo, 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 whether you listen, whether, Leo, Leo, why do you view, whether you listen, whether you view, whether you wait, Leo, Leo, whether, whether they wail, fire to do you, fire for you, way, I So, thanks a lot. It feels really weird to be admitting that you know. Anyway, see you next time.